So this week we're going to be looking at urban sketching people. And I found this picture and I thought it was perfect. Wasn't too complicated. But there is a lot of contrast in it, which means there's quite a lot of painting in it. So I warn you, it might be a longer video than normal. I might shorten it a little bit for my YouTubers because longer videos just don't really do so good on YouTube. And my Patreon members can see the full version on my Patreon channel. If you're interested in that, check out the link in my profile. So should we get cracking? Let's go. If you're doing an urban sketch, something like this, and it's something you're not sure of, the main thing to think about first is how you block in those shapes. So if you look at the reference drawing, you can see there's a shape that sort of comes up here like that, sort of rough shape, and that is this bench, and then there's this bench, and then there's that bit. And about 2/3 of the way across, we have this lamppost that comes up here, and the top of the lamppost wants to be sort of roughly there, and it's vaguely that shape, and it's vaguely that wide at the bottom. So what we're starting to do now is add in some elements, if you know what I mean. Now, the people are sort of in line with that and about halfway across, and we can kind of just like sketch in that hat, say, and that's going to give us a point. So when it comes to the next step for this then, what's that going to look like? Well, I'm going to get a small mop brush here, and with the exception of the lantern area in there, so that's the only bit I'm bothered about keeping not. I want to keep dry. I'm going to put on a bit of water. As you can see, the page is buckling up. Watercolor. This is a cold press paper. This is watercolor paper. You don't want it to be moisture proof. Anyway, so one of the things I would recommend whenever you do a watercolor drawing is just some tissue, because obviously when it goes wrong, you're going to be crying like a tiny baby. But sometimes you need to pull some water off. So how am I going to do this guy? Well, I'm looking at the reference drawing and I see a little bit of blue in the top, and I see some oranges and I see some yellows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do stage 1, a rough, quite punchy colour, and then stage 2, maybe add a bit more in, and then we'll see. So the first thing I'm going to do is think about those little colours. So I'm going to take some of this forget-me-not blue that is on my palette here, and this is a very, very subtle blue from Deep Light, and I'm just going to add that in at the top there. Let me go do too much, and then I'm going to start mixing up a grey for this dark bit. So for that I'm going to use the French ultramarine because it's actually quite granulating, and I don't necessarily want a granulating sky for this. What I'm going to use is some primary blue, and then this is a dark umber, and those make a beautiful sky. Actually, this is a light umber, I tell a lie. And actually this colour bark is a little bit like Van Dyke brown, so that's a little bit, it knocks some of the blue out of it. There's quite a lot of brown in the sky actually, and there's a little bit of sort of orangey bits as well. So I'm going to just leave that like that, ready to go. So we'll clean the brush. And the next layer I want to put in here is some of these more peachy sort of elements. So I'm going to take a little bit of this magenta rose, and I want to make that more of a sort of peachy colour. So I'll add in a little bit of raw sienna to that. There we go. And maybe a little bit of yellow, just to punch it up a little. Is that going to be too yellow? Probably. Maybe a little bit of the rose hip. You see, this is where you make mud if you're not careful. So we'll leave it at that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that in there. Now already I'm not liking that, so you can use your tissue, pull a little bit out, and then I'll just try mixing a little bit of rose hip and orange in there together. Maybe a little bit of that natural sienna, because that was just a bit too brown for me. Well, that's better. So I'm going to add in a little bit of colour there. There is a few spots of that in this cloud up here, and we have a band of it running down here. So I'm going to put that in, because this is an underpainting, so what you want is that to be a bit subtle, if you know what I mean. We don't want it to be too dry, so I might add a little bit more water in there. There we go. So the next is this brown that I mixed earlier. I'll just add a little bit more saturation to that. And then I'm going to choose quite a distinct line through here. There is quite a spot actually there, interestingly enough, of like a bit of yellow. So I'm going to be afraid to add that in. And then now it may seem to the untrained eye like I am just completely making this up. Well, that's because I am. There is no right or wrong here. It's really however you want it to look. One of the things I like about watercolour is you get some of these hard edges, you get some of these soft edges. It kind of moves around quite a lot. You can add in some, here I'm adding in some just neat brown pigment into this. Just want to sort of darken some of that clouds. If you wanted to, you could grab a bit of this magenta rose, and just add in a few little elements of that. You know, because clouds are often made up of many interesting colours and blues and all sorts of stuff. Add in a couple of splashes. Why not? It's my picture. Right, so I'm going to come back and probably add in a little bit more darkness there. Actually, I mean, I could add a little bit more pigment here, save me time. Should we do it in one? Should we try doing it in one? Let's just try that. So if I add in too much in one go, it goes cakey. But I'm just going to try and do this in one because I genuinely want to try and make this as easy as possible for folks. I don't want them to think they have to go back in with multiple applications. So I'm just going to be really bold and add in pigment. There we go. Why not? Live a little. So that means that's what the sky done in one, and then the next layer really is just a solid layer of shadow under here. So I'm going to pick up that same paint and I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add in a layer of dark here, and I won't do it up there because that's still going to be wet. So I need to wait for all that all to dry here, but I'm going to just put in a wash here of grey. So mix a bit more up there. Now, rather than just leaving that as a complete flat wash, you have an opportunity here of actually adding a little bit of interest. So if you add in a little bit of magenta down here and then some direct blue pigment, it adds a kind of element of like quite nice shadow. And again, you can go in with a little bit more of that brown under here and then finish down in this corner maybe with some super dark under here. Now I'm going to go back and obviously be adding to this, but any opportunity to break up a space and just add interest in is always worth it. Maybe put a bit of blue in there. I'm not a fan of that being so toned, so I'll add in some. Okay, so that's cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm drying this brush off on this tissue here like this. And then I'm going to just pull out a little bit of this pigment. Now the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to hair dry this now and I don't want it to all zoom around all over the place. As you can see, I've used quite a lot of granulating pigment in this sky. And it's broken up and done all sorts of wonderful things. So we'll look at that a bit closely after it's dried. So to summarise how we kind of got here, apart from the line work, obviously, is the stage, what we did for the watercolour stage is we wetted the sky and then just kind of splotted it on. And once you've got down some of the lighter tones, you can sort of put some of the heavy ones over the top of it, but I quite like it. So the other thing I'm going to do now is just build up a couple of layers really of like highlights and lowlights. So the highlights, I'm going to do them all probably with the gel pen. I want to keep it quite simple. So I really now need to look at the next sort of dark level really. So we have, yes, everything down here, the lamppost and everything is darker than the highlights in the sky. So I'm going to put another layer on just to bring everything down a little bit. And that's going to be on all of the stuff that's down here. Now some of it is going to be slightly lighter than the rest. So I'm going to do that dark. But for this muted area of stone here, I'm going to use a slight natural sienna. It's not natural sienna, is it? Raw sienna. There we go. Tone in here. And there's a few other little bits we can do there. Like there's that bit there. No. There's a few other colours we can put in. Say, for example, we've got a tiny bit of blue in here that this arm is. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit of blue pigment in there. Like that. And then we've got some skin tone and a little bit of sort of like skin tone areas. And then we've got this wood that's on the back of the, bench here. I don't want to do a lot of colours down here. I just want to do a couple to sort of suggest some different areas. And it does help to sort of flesh it out slightly. Let's go for a little bit more of that raw sienna here. And I'm not bothered about these ones merging into each other too much. I'm just going to dab it in like that. So I'm going to go mix something up much darker, and I'm going to do that here now. There is two sides to this. One side is got some sun on it and the other side doesn't. But I'm not going to be too precious. Do some light marks. Because if I start adding too much on there, I think it'll... Right. This is an example of how the watercolour, sometimes you need to just pull marks off when you make a real mess of them, like that. So I've just redone that bit. There we go. Better. So when I put my shadow in this side and I start building the shadows up down there, that'll make a lot more sense. The other thing I'm going to do is just, again, transfer a little bit of that slight peach colour just into that hand there. So let's use the hairdryer again on that. This is the kind of weird stage where it doesn't quite look right, but that's because we haven't got these really deep shadows in yet. So as I'm building these up on my palette, I'm obviously keeping some of these similar colours, but I'm going to start darkening areas down a bit and adding in some shadows. So the first one is on this side, make that a bit darker. And we can start being a bit bolder with our pigments, so mixy, mixy, mix. So we've got this bit here, follow that along, and then obviously that shadow is going to run down there and come down into here. Now this shadow can run all the way along here and actually continue. You want to get your bang for your buck. It's always good to have sort of double duty really when it comes to your watercolours. There's going to be some shadow under here. I'm going to continue running that under there, under here. I'll leave some areas. We're going to put some shadow under there like that. There we go. Right, so we do have some other areas here where we have some slight darker bits. I'll just add in, I kind of missed that earlier. And then what I'm going to do for the dark bits around the trousers is I'm going to mix a slightly even darker tone, I think, and then going with one more level of like highlights, lowlights type things. Let's just put some of those on there like that. So I think that's a not bad. I'll just put a bit of texture over there for that one. So I'm going to take some of this pigment here. I might actually make it a little bit blacker, and then I'm going to just come in under here. Now there is a few areas of shadow on this shirt. I might just put those in like that. Now this bark here is a real granulating colour. It does give you an awful lot of dark textures. It's nice. And it's one of the amazing deep light colours. I love them. Now one of the things with watercolours that I think people do get a little bit afraid with, and I understand that, is going too dark, but I think the secret really is just to not put too much on at once. People who watch this might think, you know, well, why is he always going back and using the hairdryer? It's because I layer things up a little bit at a time. I don't like to put too much paint on at once, because I think what it does is it can make the picture quite cakey, Right, so I'll hair dry that again, then I'm going to go on with the last dark areas, and then I'm kind of done, I think. I'll put some highlights on it. Okay, so just the last little bits of dark to do now then. So I'm going to again mix up a little bit more pigment. Now if I use a little bit of this Starry Night, it's a slightly, I think there's a bit more ivory in it. It's not quite as granulating as that bark, which is really, really granulating. Okay, I'm just going to add in a tiny bit of shadow just under here, on the backs of these. I think it might just give it a bit more of a sense of kind of realism, ever so slightly. There we go. Right, bit of hair drying and a few highlights on that, and we'll see how it looks. Like while I'm here, there is a slight murky sheen in this light, but it's got a bit of a character to it. And I want to just try and capture a little bit of that essence in there. There we go. Right, so this is the bit that I actually always enjoyed the most, is the little highlights. I always think it really makes everything pop. Now the light source is actually coming from over here, so we've got quite a lot of like what I would call like a rim light effect. So we're gonna put down some light here, and there is a sort of bulb in there, and then we have some detail here. Okay, so sort of painted in that a little bit. It's maybe a bit too much, but no, I don't mind it. And we'll put a little bit on there, and then we have some in the glasses here. There is a little bit of just highlight on the face. And this person here has the same on the glasses and on the hair. And then in the shirt here we have a little bit, and I'm going to put that rim light all the way around the front here of the clothing, and I quite like that. I'm not afraid of showing that off. And then on the front here also, because this does run down here like that. And then there's a hint of it here, and also a sort of suggestion of it there as well. Put a little bit on there, and on top of the bench as well, and I'm going to add it on there just for the sake of continuity. Right, now I'm going to leave that there. Now I think as a kind of little people study, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I do quite like it. I obviously am not going to pretend for a second that it's a simple sketch. I actually think it's quite a complicated sketch, but done quite quickly, if you know what I mean. Just while I'm finishing this, I want to talk about a couple of things. The two things that I think most people struggle with when it comes to their own art is enjoying your own visuals. It's like, you know, enjoying your own cooking, or you know, enjoying your own company even. And I think that comes with experience. It comes from sitting with your own style and just developing it and becoming comfortable with it. But I also think it comes with actually loosening up and becoming a little bit more free and playful with your own art, because that will speed up your level of development. The other thing that you really have to keep in mind is there often isn't a shortcut. You know, it would be great to be here on YouTube offering a panacea and say that if you watch my 5-week course, you will definitely improve. Yeah, you might improve by watching it, because you'll be thinking about things in a slightly different way, but you've still got to do the work. Sorry, you've still got to do the play. One of the things that I find really helps me is just doing a little a day. You know, literally just doing a doodle a day. And actually this drawing came from a doodle. I sat down a couple of days ago and I saw this and I thought I'd have a sketch of it, and I did this drawing here, and you know, some of the proportions are wrong, you know, people's heads are a bit big or whatever, but it was a really fun little doodle, and it made me think maybe I should do one of these as a little urban sketching demo. But yeah, so I'll talk you through just a couple of bits of this. I think there's some really quite nice paint in here, and you know, some quite interesting mix of colors. This is sort of slightly impressionistic, but it works really well. And we'll come down to the figures. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. I think values wise, levels wise, it's pretty good. I think it's sufficiently abstract. I have just noticed that I was going to continue this person down here like that. I think that person in the background is a bit weirdly lost, and it looks like that person has 3 legs. But because these are abbreviations, sometimes you do end up losing some of the details. But overall, it's pretty good. I like it. It's a fun one. I really enjoyed doing it, and that's the main thing. I enjoy these quite mixed up washes. You can see here quite a lot of this bark colour that I used in the sky, and you look at the granulation on it. I'll just do a close up on that, and you can see So yeah, a lot of this bark colour, this deep light watercolour, it does granulate quite a lot, and you can get some quite weird effects. I think often these images where there's a lot of contrast, you know, lots of darks, can put off a lot of people with who are learning watercolour. And watercolour, I think, has a bit of a bad reputation for being a bit wishy-washy. Is obviously a huge cliche, but for being slightly faded and not having a lot of contrast and sort of dynamics about it. But actually, you know, if you saturate your pigments and make sure that when you're putting a wash on, it's got plenty of colour in it, you can get some amazing effects, and you can be bold. So do put too much paint on. Do make the shadows too dark. I think it's a great way to learn, is to push yourself too far, and then you'll see those results. So next time, if you're approaching that, you'll get a warning. You'll go, oh, I've done this before, I understand. Anyway, this is a long video and I'm rumbling on, so we'll see you next time. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you again. Bye bye.